Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 2nd. First, some announcements. One, I'm the town's representative to the Massport Community Advisory Committee, which was a body set up a few years ago by the state legislature to provide some community input and oversight to Massport, which of course operates Logan Airport and the cruise terminal and some other assets around the state. So the committee finally, after a number of attempts, was able to get a quorum, and I was elected to the executive committee to an at-large position.
I told you not to do that committee. I'm jealous.
The chair is the representative from Hull. The vice chair is the representative from Winthrop. There's, I think, something like 36 communities represented. And the committee also makes an appointment to the Massport Board of Directors, and the committee appointed John Nucci to the Massport Board of Directors. Mr. Nucci, former chair of the Boston School Committee, was on the city council, ran for mayor at one point, and now he's working for Suffolk University. So that committee is finally getting going. So that's my big news. Anything else?
Oh, I'll add a couple things. I am the designated board member to the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission. I met with them very briefly at their meeting last Wednesday. Just, so you know, I asked them to retract their statement regarding that they made a few weeks ago. I also am the designated person to serve as chair of the Open Space Planning Committee. We had a hearing on Wednesday also, where a number of people brought up some incredibly useful and interesting thoughts to the open space planning process, and that is moving along, I think, very, very well. And that's it. That's what I've been doing.
We had a devotion school building committee meeting a couple mornings ago, and we're moving along with everything. And I just want to say I am always amazed at how well Tony Quigley keeps everything moving along on these projects.
So when does a shovel hit the ground?
When is it, Mel? Do you remember?
Well, we first have to design the project and then bid it, so I don't know offhand. Be a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably be,
Well, it's mostly
Summer.
designed. I mean, we actually saw a model at our meeting, so it's well along in
Yeah, it's
the
getting
design process, I think, to be fair.
I'm guessing this summer, but I could.
Yeah, I think the idea was after the kids were out of school for this year, that things would start.
Okay. Selectman Franco.
I have two announcements. One, I think the rest of the board wants to, again, congratulate and thank Dr. Hardwick on her retirement. I know a number of board members joined me at her send-off event last week, along with the town administrator. And on a personal note, that was the first time I had been in the Waterworks Museum, and it's an unbelievable space. And I believe is free to visit. So I would encourage members of the community and anybody else who may be interested to go partake in it. I certainly plan on going back in the light of day and exploring a little bit more. I also wanted to make board members and members of the public aware that the inaugural public meeting of the River Road Study Committee is taking place tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. In the Dennehy Room in the Public Health Building, right across the street from Town Hall here.
Denny room.
Denny Room, excuse me.
Room in the basement.
In the basement. The garden level of the Public Health Building. And that committee, of course, is going to take a look at the industrial island, the 6 parcels at the intersection of Washington Street and Brookline Avenue, and sort of chart a path forward or consider a path forward that may result in some modifications, the introduction of an overlay zoning district to town meeting about a year from now, just shy of a year from now, in the fall of 2016. So stay tuned, and certainly members of the public are invited to attend, but it's a public meeting, so organizational in nature, and look forward to updating the board over the next couple of months about the activities.
Selectman Heller, do you have something?
Well, I just want to report to you that the Climate Action Committee met last week. You got, I think, a copy of the letter in your packet last week that that was drafted and approved by majority vote, asking that, or as far as the 9th school site, that we pay great attention to many factors affecting climate change and the environment. So I know we're all on board about that. We talked about the fact that it is a very complex issue, and many issues and complexities and factors go into this. So, but I think the Climate Action Committee wanted to make a point that, they hoped that we would give the maximum consideration to the climate issues.
Can I ask, I have been dutifully saving my styrofoam all year. Isn't it about now that you guys usually
I think the Climate Week is happening at the end of March.
Okay.
I think Lara would know.
Yeah, it'll be in March if they moved the weather concerns from last year.
I think we've had it in January before,
Yeah,
but it's,
yeah.
it tends to be cold and nasty, and this year was an exception, of course, but, so I think that moving it forward to March is, I think, probably a permanent thing.
I will continue to hold on to my
Okay, so I'd like to
styrofoam.
dive into the calendar. First is the minutes for January 26th. Any changes?
I had some slight edits.
I think I had some edits too.
Okay, so pass them over to Kate, and I'll move that the minutes be approved as amended. All those in favor, Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item is the question of amending the policy on public comment. Ms. Kleckner, would you like to?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this board requested my review of the current public comment, in particular relation to requiring an advance sign-up, which we have, which our current policy does. We require people to sign up in advance, and I think as was demonstrated over the last few weeks, there are times when that may not be practical, given events that might come up in the community of a timely nature. And so I was asked to look at the school committee's procedure, which does not require advance registration, but registration at the event itself. So you almost are mandated to require, to schedule a public comment every week, well, assuming that people sign up. So the policy that you have attached, and which I recommend you approve, is essentially a melding of our policy with the school committee's policy, and the major issue is that under number 1 of the public comment procedure, you can sign up at the meeting.
Right. One change I was thinking of was that we also allow for advance sign-up, and that it would be first come, first served. So if 5 people sign up in advance, then that would, fill the calendar. But there's also an option in item 4 that if we believe an issue requires more time, that we could have public comment at the end of the agenda.
Right. I also had talked independently to the town administrator about that issue, because I felt that people should be able to sign up in advance, and we should tell them what to do to sign up, where to call, who to call, and or email.
And I believe the school committee allows advance sign-up.
and that it should be done in sign-up order.
Selectman Franco?
I'll also highlight in number 4, it appears as though if there's a overwhelming demand for public comment at a given meeting, we would have the option of delaying speakers beyond the allotted 15 minutes to the end of the meeting after we've completed our business. So there's
Right.
that's worked in the past couple of weeks. And
It actually
seems-
says that here.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm
yeah.
making sure that everybody
Okay.
knows that that's an issue that's been addressed.
Right, so, I think, the events of the last month or month and a half have demonstrated to me that the policy that we had wasn't quite working, and we were making lots of exceptions. So if a policy doesn't work, let's change it to a way that'll actually work, and I think this does it.
I have 2 comments. I have a typo that I'll just give you now. Secondly, items 7 and 11, with respect to 7, individual participation shall be limited once every 4 meetings on a different topic. I'm not sure that's necessary, and it's sort of is going to be a flashpoint for, comment by people.
And that, just to be clear, that was taken directly from our existing policies.
Yeah, the problem is, that we've had at times, one person that wants to come back to tell you the same thing every meeting, and,
I think that's just one of the things we have to put up
Well,
with.
it's something that happened at the school committee level as well, and, it doesn't work, so to have the same person come back time after time after time. So I think maybe we could add a phrase in here which says, individual participation to be limited to once every 4 meetings on a different topic, except that the chair may, waive this requirement in the situations where you have, something, people come to talk to you about something, then something happens, and then they come to talk to you again in the same general issue, but things have happened in the meantime. I think that that's an appropriate circumstance that the chair could use his or her discretion about.
The other thing, item 11, chair meeting, the chair of the meeting may terminate any individual's privilege or address for inappropriate conduct or statement. Yeah, maybe we just need to, accept the fact that people can come and be very difficult.
Yeah.
And, the enforcement of those type of provisions, both 7 and 11, I think, can get difficult and distract us from.
I think,
Well, that's
what
gonna-
if you had somebody, though, that's swearing or using inappropriate language?
Or making personal attacks.
Yeah, or making person, I think you need to have it in there, and
Yeah.
then it's up to
It's going to be up to
chair,
the
huh?
chair, whoever that chair is, going down the road to use their good judgment.
I just think, okay, we just need to think about our ability to enforce that. And,
Right.
and, okay, the chair would, have the discretion to either allow it or not, but we should be aware that's going to be a flashpoint too.
Right. That's one of the challenges of being chair. So I'm going to move acceptance of the new policy as amended by our comments. Are we comfortable? And
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
And I have one other.
And a typo that Selectman Green. Typo, whatever. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item is the question of authorizing the chair to execute letters of intent with Blue Wave Capital in connection with solar installations on municipal properties. This is an exciting topic to me. Ms. Curtis Hayes, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Laura Curtis Hayes, I'm Senior Planner in the Planning Department. I'm here with Mark Sylvia and Sandra Brown from Blue Wave Capital. They're our partnered solar developer. And I'd just like to give a brief update on where we are in our progress toward developing solar on municipal properties. We've been working with Blue Wave and a number of other staff members in town to identify appropriate properties that would be good for solar. We've identified 8 sites that we'd like to pursue further, and they should be listed in the 2 letters of intent that I hope you've received in advance. They include the transfer station, the Runkle School, the pool building, the main library, fire station number 5, Sewell Gym, Devotion School, and the high school. The LOIs have been reviewed by town council, and they've been okayed, and they've actually already been endorsed by Blue Wave Capital. And I'd like to kind of pass it over to Mark Sylvia, who I think has some words he'd like to say.
Sure, Mrs. Sylvia, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and Town Administrator Kleckner. It's a pleasure for us to be here this evening, and it's a real pleasure for us to be partnering with MAPC and the Town of Brookline to help you realize, help support you realizing your clean energy goals for the town. This PowerPoint presentation, the first few slides are an overview of who Blue Wave is and a little bit more about the MAPC program. So what I thought I would do with your indulgence is to skip right over to slide 9, which will give you an update as to what we've done to date, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Sandra Brown, who will
See, this
go.
is my favorite kind of presentation where you skip to 9 slides.
Happy to do it, Mr. Chairman. And let's see. It's the best way to move this.
Got to laugh, right?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we'll go right to page 9, and this gives you an update as to what work has been done to date by Blue Wave. And I do want to thank Lara and the members of the team here at Town Hall who've been very helpful in identifying sites, providing us access to those sites, and giving us general direction as to what the priorities of the town are. So when we began our engagement, we identified a number of sites, municipal sites here in the town. We had to understand roof age, age of building, suitability for different types of solar deployment, whether it be ground-mounted or rooftop or carport. We worked with the town to narrow the sites to those that fit within your overall objectives, certainly, and took into consideration buildings that may be under construction, like school buildings. From there, we also did our carport feasibility at the transfer station on Newton Street to understand the whether or not a carport would be feasible at that location, the deployment of a carport. And then understanding all of those locations, doing those feasibility assessments, we were able to identify PPA rates, power purchase agreement rates for each one of those locations. So that is what we've done to date. I'm going to turn it over to Sandra Brown, who's one of our directors at Blue Wave, who's going to go into a little bit more detail on the sites in terms of size of systems and what we project as savings at those sites.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. Getting into the individual sites that we've identified, we have specified some carports that could be installed at the transfer station, which carry the largest capacity in the overall portfolio. And as Mark said earlier, we've also identified the Runkle School, the Brookline swimming pool located at 66 Tappan Street, as well as the main library here on Washington Street, the fire station on Babcock Street, Sewell Gym, as well as the Brookline High School and the Devotion School, as all potentially being part of this procurement of solar. I would note that the the first 6 systems are on a much quicker trajectory in terms of development and construction than the latter 2. Brookline High School being involved in ongoing plans for renovation or construction at that site, as well as a few different avenues, and the Devotion School presently being under construction and development there. We suspect that those two sites will be ready for development in 2017 or 2018. And so we have identified two separate letters of intent for execution, one that addresses those projects which we can move forward at present, as well as those two projects and any additional projects that may come along which have a slightly longer trajectory. Overall, the savings, the energy savings that we're looking to generate for the town of Brookline are close to 2.4 million kilowatts annually. And an overall capacity of just over 2 megawatts across the portfolio. Yes?
Can I just ask you about this slide? I was perplexed that the transfer station carport, the size is the largest, but the yield is the smallest.
So carports are somewhat interesting in that they don't necessarily have the highest yield. Just because the yield is slightly lower doesn't mean that it's not a good opportunity for the town. A yield of around 1,200 kilowatts is a strong yield, and really that is a conservative estimate on our part at this time. It could go up to 1,250. So overall, we are anticipating that the savings will range somewhere between 3.7 million to 4.6 million over the 20-year term of the contracts. That equates to just under $200,000, $171,000 on an annual basis. To date, we've identified, as Mark was saying, we've identified net metering credit purchase agreement rates, or the cost for us to transfer the net metering credit towards your Eversource energy accounts. And we are anticipating that the average rate will be just about 12 cents across the portfolio. This does include those projects which have a longer term in terms of construction, but those two projects are very ideal for development as solar PV.
Can you just talk for a second about whether the implication of net metering and the legislation that's at the state level, if we need to be concerned about the cap being hit and we're not being able to sell the power back to the grid?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. So right now there's actually, and unfortunately I don't know the exact amount that's available under the Eversource cap, but under the Eversource net metering cap, there, last I checked, which was Friday, there was a sufficient amount of capacity available. Most of these systems will be quickly qualified. In order to qualify for the incentives, you need to ascertain site control, you need to obtain an interconnection service agreement, as well as all your non-ministerial permits and approvals that are required for the construction of the facility. So for all of the rooftop projects, that's actually a very quick and straightforward process, and we anticipate being able to qualify those projects under the current net metering programs. The transfer station, that is a little bit more of a lengthy timeline because we will need to go through a more lengthy permitting process with that project, but there's a potential that it could work under this cap or work under a follow-on program.
Once you get qualified, if many other people decide to put solar on their roofs and try to get into the program, if you're already in, do you get to stay in, or can you get bumped out as there's more people trying to participate?
So it's effectively what we do is we are pre-qualifying the system for the incentive, and then once we pre-qualified, we have a specific timeline under which we can construct the system. If we run afoul of that timeline, which is quite lengthy, there's a potential that we will lose that cap allocation, but it's very low potential.
Okay.
It just requires us to stay on our toes and develop promptly.
Are these systems eligible for the solar renewable energy credits that residential systems are eligible for? And is that built into these calculations?
Yeah, so the Solar Renewable Energy Certificate Program, all of these systems are eligible. There are different tiers under the SREC 2 program, market sector A, B, and C, and all of these projects are either qualified under A or B. The carport would qualify under market sector A. The rooftop systems would qualify under market sector B, which is a slight step down in the value of those SRECs that are generated by the system, but very comparable.
But the town can't take advantage of those certificates. That's why we have you here.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So, can you give me an estimate of how much this will improve the rate of renewables in the town, among the town use?
Do you have a sense of the current level of renewables that you have?
For a town, the routine for the town already has, because we have a system on the main library and a
Right.
system on the Putterham.
Right.
Both are, I think the Putterham one, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, they're both relatively small
Right.
systems.
Right.
I want to say under 20, they're small.
Yeah, based on so I've seen the system that's adjacent to here, and I would say that it is about a 20 kW system. The system that is over on Putterham, I haven't seen it recently, but if recollection serves, it's at around 40 kW. This will times that by 1,000? Am I getting my multiplier right?
Okay.
So it'll really significantly increase the quantity of renewables that you have installed in town.
Okay, so I'm just interested in letting everyone know that we would be reducing our carbon emissions here, and instead of having enough to, 50% of our energy, of our electricity use would come from renewables, would this boost it to 75, or are we at 25 and we would be at 50, or, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and I understand the question. I think that we're going to have to go and look at your utility bills for what the current bottom line is, and we
Okay.
can get you that difference in percentage as a follow-up.
Okay,
I know that you said that the suitability of individual roofs was based on 5 different factors: the age of the roof, and the condition of the roof, the suitability of the ground, and parking lot space. I'm wondering if you can just sort of scope out what that criteria meant. Is it roofs that are 10 years or younger, that aren't metal, that...
Yeah. Absolutely. So actually, metal-seamed roofs, for reference sake, are fantastic for solar, as are a number of roofs. So it all depends on what the roof material is, as well as the property itself. The first thing that we're looking for is solar access. How much solar resource do you have at that site? Is it oriented to the south, the west, the east, the north? We don't... Sites that are oriented to the north are generally less agreeable. We're also looking at trees that happen to be on site and that might shade the system. So in a heavily treed area, it's really challenging to put a solar array because the yield goes down substantially. The other thing that we're looking for in terms of roofs, it all depends on the roofing material. So a rubber membrane, and I've always mess up the acronym, EPDM, or those rooftops typically have a 20 to 30 year lifespan. So we're looking to capture a roof that is relatively early in that lifespan so that the lifetime of the solar system will correspond to the life of the roof, so you don't have to remove the solar system in the if the roof needs to be replaced. That's generally a cost we look to avoid. So for shingle roofs and EPDYM or rubber membrane roofs, we're looking for 5 to 10 years old at most. For a metal seam roof, there's a lot more flexibility because those tend to be anywhere from 40 to 70 years in terms of warranty and lifespan. For shingle roofs, we're looking to avoid those.
Okay, I think we...
and you're looking to avoid slate roofs as well, is that correct?
Pardon me, I misspoke. We're looking to avoid slate roofs,
Okay.
not shingle roofs.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, are we ready for a motion? I'll move that we authorize the chair to execute letters of intent with Blue Wave Capital in connection with solar installations on municipal properties. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is exciting.
Very.
Next item is question of accepting a rebate in the amount of $38.50 from NStar Electric Eversource Energy in connection with energy efficiency programs. Mr. Feisen.
Good evening, Assistant Town Administrator Faison. Charlie Simmons can't be with us here tonight, but this is a energy rebate that was derived from variable frequency drives for exhaust fans at Old Lincoln. So what that did was it slowed down the fans to save money and power. And it would be for $3,850, and the account numbers listed are where we would place it inside the budget.
Any questions?
Can you find more?
Always trying to find one.
Would you please convey to Mr. Simmons our appreciation, because he does a good job making things as energy efficient as possible and getting these rebates frequently, so.
I would be more than happy to.
Okay, I'll therefore move that we accept this rebate of $38.50 from NStar Electric Eversource Energy in connection with energy efficiency programs. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Of course I accept aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item is question of approving change order number 4 in the amount of $505 for work to be completed by life safety improvements in connections with fire stations 5 and 6, life safety improvements project. Mr. Quigley,
Good evening.
welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Tony Quigley with the Building Department. This is, as you stated, change order number 4 in the amount of $505. This is for the new building Zetron internal paging system. The Fire Station 6 has a training room, and it's a request of the fire department to install volume control on that system in the training room. So that's what this is for.
Any questions, comments? I will therefore move that we approve the change order number 4 in the amount of $505 for work to be completed by life safety improvements in connections with fire stations 5 and 6, life safety improvements program. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item is the question of approving amendment number 12 in the amount of $28,600 for work to be completed by HMFH architects in connection with the Edward Devotion School renovation project. Mr.
So,
Quigley?
Mr. Quigley, you missed my complimenting you at the beginning of our meeting on keeping us all on track on devotion. But I was forgetting, when is the date we expect to put the first shovel in the ground is that June of this year?
July 11th. Well, you won't actually see a shovel. It'll be interior demolition and abatement work happening. But figuratively speaking, yes, July 11th. We will be in construction. And we'll be done 24 months from then. So essentially, we're actually in construction now. You just can't see it yet.
Enabling work.
Yeah. It's exciting, very much so. And thank you to all of you for your support, and particularly Selectman Daley for leading the building committee. So this is for work associated with that project, obviously. The condition we had at the current garage, which in the Stedman Street wing, is that, as you know, that will be demolished, and a new part of the school built over that area. That's a particularly complex intersection of the construction, because that's the intersection of the 1974 building with the 1913 building, and it's built over a previous 1924 building. So there's all kinds of issues there with respect to excavation and shoring of the 1913 building. So the idea here was to minimize the amount of excavation and removal of material under the garage and essentially leave it in place for the new building, and to expand the size of the footings and therefore the structure.
This would simplify the amount of excavation, and the complexity of the shoring, and hopefully make the whole project quite a bit more simple. So this was to do some borings in the garage, 4 more borings in the garage to corroborate the engineer's position on that. And it's very difficult to do borings in that garage because of the low ceiling height and all of that. But that's what this is for.
Questions, comments?
I have a question about cost, but before I put my foot in my mouth, I want to look at the agenda and see what the vote is. So, Mr. Quigley, can you just explain to me why... I withdraw my question. I figured it out myself. I'm sorry.
This is some money for some drilling, but ultimately, we're expecting this approach to save us money, because it's reusing, and leaving some material in there, less removal of material, and and just enlarging the footings that would be in that area. So it is some money up front, but we expect it to bring savings to the project.
It's in keeping with, we're really trying to learn as much about this building ahead of time, because it is a very complex project. And there will be things that we will still encounter things that we don't expect, but the idea is to minimize those things.
My question was about the balance that's shown on page F3 of our packet, the $8.6 million after Amendment 11. And my impression is that that's the total amount of change orders, the total cost of change orders that we've approved to this point?
Yes, but keep in mind that the biggie was the continuation of the architect services through the balance of the project, which is, everything so far is in keeping with our budget line items.
Okay. Can I move for a vote? Okay. I will move that we approve amendment number 12 on the amount of $28,600 for work to be completed by HMFH Architects in connection with the Edward Devotion School renovation project. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item is a question of appointing the Edward Devotion School Trade Contractor Pre-Qualification Committee. That's a mouthful, but it sounds like progress.
It is progress.
Mr.
This
Quigley.
is, for a project of this size and for the estimated value of the file sub-bid trades, we are required by statute to do trade contractor pre-qualification. We've done this in the past on big projects, and the process is already underway in terms of advertising and getting interested potential bidders to get their firms pre-qualified. So this is asking you folks to approve the committee as was the nominees of the committee.
Any questions or comments? Therefore, I'll move that we appoint the Edward Devotion School Trade Contractor Pre-Qualification Committee as follows: Mr. Kenneth Kaplan for the Building Commission, Ray Masak for the Building Department, with an alternate, Mr. Russ Hugassian, Jonathan Hurst, Senior Project Manager, Shawmut Design and Construction, and Mr. John Miller, Principal, HMFH Architects. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And the next item is the question of approving proprietary items for the Edward Devotion School project. Mr. Quigley again.
Yes, these are items recommended to be proprietary for this project, and in keeping with what we have done in the past on virtually all other capital projects. And the idea here is to minimize the list of items proprietary, but nominate those that, for uniformity of systems or ease of maintenance or cost reasons, in the public interest, to make them proprietary. And I can run through the entire list if you wish, or not.
No, I
mean,
don't think that's necessary.
Basically, I've consulted with Mr. Simmons, the fire department, and engineering in the water department on the items and systems that we are recommending be made proprietary.
So typically, when you're getting bids, you have to put out something for, you have to write the specifications so that you can get 3 bids. And this is where they're asking us, we don't want to go out and get
Right.
3 bids because we want all of our door locks and alarm panels and things to be as similar as possible throughout the town, so.
Right. So this specifies Slage lock
Yes,
sets, because we
yes.
use Slage everywhere else. So we minimize the number of keys.
I thought we had used Johnson Controls in the past for fire control systems. Am I mistaken about
Johnson
that?
Controls for temperature controls. We are not recommending that for this project. Johnson Control will be one of 3 that is listed, because we do have Johnson Controls. The other that will be listed is Siemens, because that's at the high school.
Yep.
And then there will be a 3rd that is listed. We're not recommending that at this time.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so any other questions or comments? I will therefore move that we approve the proprietary items as reflected in our packet on pages H1 and 2 for the Edward Devotion School, project. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the last item on a miscellaneous calendar is the question of
Did
approving...
you want to vote on that?
Oh, chair votes aye. Sorry about that. I was so excited, I forgot to vote.
Yes, yes.
Question of approving and executing a contract amendment number 1 in the amount of $14,750 with HKT Architects in connection with the Municipal Service Center. Mr. Quigley again.
Yes, there are 2 items that pertain to this. One is for $2,560. It was to explore the potential of expanding the muster room to better serve the needs of the DPW there. And that was $2,560. And the other item for $12,010 is to have additional structural engineer involvement in the construction administration of the slab repair in the existing building. It's turned out to be quite complex, and it was felt that the town would be best served if we had the structural engineer more involved in the supervision and addressing issues in the slab, in the elevated slab repair.
Any questions or comments? Therefore, I will move that we approve and execute the contract amendment number 1 in the amount of $14,750 with HKT Architects in connection with the Municipal Service Center. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Yeah, aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening.
Okay, we're moving on to our main calendar. We have noticed a public hearing for 8 o'clock, and we're running, I'm guessing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 minutes behind. So, sorry about that, guys. Okay, the first item up is an incident update from Police Chief O'Leary, who's going to brief the board on this stabbing incident that occurred last Wednesday.
Yes, good evening. Just to touch base with everybody, just to be clear, there were 2 crime scenes that we had to investigate, one at 75 Harvard Street and the other at 198 St. Paul Street, and we received a lot of assistance that day. I was joined for a couple hours by Town Administrator Mel Kleckner down at 198 St. Paul Street. We asked and we received state police representatives from the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. Matter of fact, the DA, Michael Morrissey, spent a few hours with us that afternoon. As I think I said before, that Boston Police were at both crime scenes, assisting us both with intelligence documentation and getting the pictures out over the BRIC internet forum so people can help us identify the car. Brookline Fire assisted the ambulance at both locations with the victims. DPW assisted us at both crime scenes, as well as some of the searches that we did of catch basins as we looked for the firearm that was involved. And of course, we had a lot of interaction with the schools. Other people I really have to extend credit for is the citizens that came forward. We really got a lot of help from the description of the car to the plate number to the what happened out on Harvard Street, the description of the person that fled from Harvard Street, and then we had walk-ins into the police station. So we had both telephone calls and walk-ins, which was great, which added a lot, which really enhanced our ability to make a couple of quick arrests in this. So just to run you through, on Wednesday, last Wednesday, the 27th, at about 11:48 in the morning, we got a phone call from people at 198 St. Paul Street saying that there was a disturbance inside the building on the 3rd floor. Officers responded to that location, and about 2 minutes later, we had a second phone call of 2 males lying in the street at Harvard at Homer, 75 Harvard Street. They potentially had been struck by a motor vehicle. That was quickly upgraded to 2 people there that were stabbed and or shot, and they were on the street. Officers responded to that location as well. I think I'll go through the one scene and then take you to another one. The officers that went to 198 St. Paul Street, the first officer was Officer Brian Sheehy. He entered the foyer, was able to see that there was blood on the stairwell going up, blood along the walls, blood on the floor. Eventually, he was joined by Officer Boris Dragovic, Officer Kristen Healy, and Officer Brian Gallagher. They made their way up to the 3rd floor. As they did, the door opened. They located a subject coming out. He was covered in blood, and he had multiple gunshot wounds to his leg. He ended up suffering 3 gunshot wounds that were in and out, so it looked like there was more initially, but it was 3 wounds that the bullets entered his body and exited his body in the leg area. He was immediately treated by those officers. 2 officers stayed with the victim. 2 others went in to clear the apartment, which they did. When they came out of the apartment, they had been joined, as that was going on, by Deputy Lipson, and they realized quickly that they needed to get a tourniquet on the subject because of the bleeding. They brought a tourniquet. They were equipped with tourniquets. They had theirs. They applied the tourniquet, and we were told by medical personnel afterwards that had they not applied that, there's a very good possibility that he would have died by quick blood loss. So they actually attributed them to saving his life. What happened at that we've been able to piece together at that apartment is there was 1 subject in the apartment, a second subject, 4 subjects came in a car. 3 of the subjects that were in the car entered the building. They got to the entrance to this apartment up on the 3rd floor. They kicked in the door. When they were confronted by the homeowner, they immediately struck him over the head with a 2x4, knocking him into the ground. They were demanding to see the money. They wanted the money. They started to rip the apartment apart and make a search. And apparently they kind of lost focus of the guy that they had struck with the 2x4. He armed himself with a knife and just began stabbing the 2 individuals that were in the apartment. He stabbed them both multiple times. One of them, in turn, fired his weapon at this subject, wounding him the 3 times in the leg. At the same time, 1 shot went awry, and he wounded one of his compadres that were in the apartment at the time. The 3 subjects then leave the building. They're seen going out onto St. Paul Street and getting into the car that was parked at the corner of Powell Street. The vehicle takes off, makes its way out to Beacon Street. It's captured on our police cameras approaching Harvard Street, taking the illegal left turn across Harvard Street. Those are the pictures that we put out to the media. The car continued down Harvard towards 75 Harvard Street. As they passed St. Mary's School, the Brookline Spa, there was an ambulance parked there, as one of the paramedics from the ambulance was in getting his lunch at the spa. The car went up to the next intersection, made a U-turn. One subject jumped out of the car and fled down Linden Street. The car came back. The driver approached the one EMT sitting in the ambulance and said that his friends need help. They've been stabbed. Eventually, those two guys got out of the car and laid on the street, and that was the scene that we ran into there. Those subjects were, one of them was immediately transported because of his injuries to the hospital. The second subject was transported after he was triaged in the ambulance. The subject from 198 St. Paul Street went to the hospital as well. As those individuals were at the hospital, we had kept them under guard. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know who was who at first and what roles that they played, but we knew that they had engaged each other in combat at Harvard Street, at St. Paul Street. So we had one at the Brigham Hospital, Brigham Women's Hospital, and the other two were at the Beth Israel Hospital. During the day, we did got some court orders so we could take some testing of both of those three subjects. We also applied for search warrants for 198 St. Paul Street, and those were all in progress. We knew from witnesses' statements that the car, after the two guys got out at 75 Harvard Street, fled on Harvard towards Coolidge Corner. We picked it up on a private camera as it was operating on Harvard Street. One of the cameras on Beacon Street picked it up on Beacon as it was heading into Kenmore Square. It was followed on Boston's cameras as it turned right onto Mass Ave after going through Kenmore Square, crossing Boylston Street, crossing Huntington Ave, turning left onto Huntington Ave, and then it disappears from view of all the cameras. So when we got that information, we decided to do a search of the area down there. Detectives went down about 6:30 at night, 6 o'clock at night. They got onto St. Paul Street, and as soon as they went off to one of the side streets on St. Paul Street, they found the car parked there. We have to credit the citizens that called up because nobody really had a complete plate number. They had partial plate numbers, and we were able to piece it all together. And from talking to New York State Police, New Jersey State Police, and Colorado State Police, we realized it was a New York plate, and we put two and two together with the help of mass seizures, and we got the plate number as a rental. It was rented out of Logan Airport by a Cambridge resident. Early on in the investigation, the car was reported stolen by the Cambridge resident. Our detectives went over there to interview him at the Cambridge police station, which they did, and they were able to get a story from him. During the day, it was an active investigation into the night, and probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we developed enough probable cause to arrest the two subjects that were in the Beth Israel Hospital, and they were removed from 75 Harvard Street, and they got charged with a number of crimes. The two subjects that got arrested that night, Antonio Brown, 27 years old, out of Cambridge, and Kyrie Wilcox, 18 years old, out of Dorchester. They were charged with armed home invasion, armed assault with intent to rob, armed assault with intent to murder, unlawful possession of a firearm, and an armed assault in a dwelling. That night, we started applying for a search warrant for the car that we had towed back to the police station. The search warrant was executed the next day, and we got a pretty good amount of forensic evidence both out of the car and out of the apartment at 198 St. Paul Street. As this all continued, we were able to develop enough information by Saturday evening to get an arrest warrant for the owner of the car. We obtained the arrest warrant. We tried to locate him over the weekend. We were unsuccessful. We did have contact with his mother that said that his attorney was going to turn him in on Monday. He did not. We went out to look for him again last night, and he turned himself in today with his attorney. So he's charged with conspiracy to commit home invasion at this point. But the investigation is still going on. We have some pretty solid leads on the subject that fled down Linden Street, and we hope to have him into custody before long. As this was all going on, as you know, the location on Harvard Street couldn't be worse as far as our grammar school kids are concerned. There's two schools right there. They were left on the street between Pierce Grammar School and St. Mary's Grammar School. We asked the school people at both locations to keep their kids away from the windows and shelter them in place until we figure out what was going on. I was in contact on multiple occasions during that time, both with Mr. Kleckner, but also with Joe Conley, the school superintendent, staying in touch, keeping things, everybody informed about what was going on. They stayed that way, but we had school being released at the regular time period. Harvard Street was still closed at the time because of the forensic work that was being done, and we just had them to instruct the parents not to come out towards Harvard Street, and they all complied. We did also do a lockdown on Lawrence School because of the location where it took place to begin with on St. Paul Street, and they did the same thing. We stayed in touch with them, and there was a couple of daycare centers that we had touched base with as well during the day. But that all got released. We visited Pierce and we visited St. Mary's afterwards, and we asked them if they wanted us to come back on Thursday to talk to the kids, to assure the kids that it did not take place out there, that they just happened to end up there. Neither one of them took us up on that, so I'm sure the kids were okay the next day. That's really the quick rundown where we are. Like I said, I think it's big that people understand that these 3 arrests have been made. There is the 4th subject out there that we are actively looking for. And the 3rd subject that arrested today was the guy that rented the car, and he's from Cambridge as well. So.
Wow.
It was a busy day.
I want
It was a
to
busy day.
say your department, as usual, was very efficient in dealing with the problems, and our compliments.
Thank you.
And this was quite a complex, multiple scenes in the middle of a weekday, schools nearby, daycare centers, bus routes being rerouted, and quite an undertaking.
And I should say, we were fortunate that that there was actually a lot of police details hired that day. So before like a half hour passed down here at St. Mary's at 75 Harvard Street, we asked all the details to clear with their contractors to come and meet at a location. They received assignments. Not only did we assign officers to the schools, but we had the 2 crime scenes going. We had the 3 individuals in the hospital. We had people who we had to send to Cambridge, and then we were actively looking for both the guy that ran away in the car. So we had a lot of people that we were available to draw on. We also had officers come in off duty without being asked, and some dispatchers that lived nearby came in without being asked. We did field a lot of calls from parents anxious about their children. So
Sure.
What I take away from the story is communication. It seems like everybody was talking to one another and on the same page, and in an incident like this, I think having the free flow of information between those that need to be part of the conversation, the schools, the police department, the fire department, town hall, it's really encouraging to know that those lines of communications are open, and that there's a procedure to pass information along to those that need to be part of the solution. So thank you for that.
thanks.
Okay. Any other comments?
No, I just hope there's some pictures of Mr. Kleckner out there on the scene investigating with you.
He did the press conference with me. Yes.
Thank you, Chief, and extend our congratulations to your staff.
I will. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Next item is Robert Heiss. Is being interviewed for appointment to the Commission for the Disabled.
Yes, thanks.
Can everybody hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, why don't you tell us about yourself and your interest in the commission? And
Well, at my work, I'm known as Rob Heist. In the town of Brookline, I'm known as the husband of Marcia Heist. So I'd like to try to change that a little bit and have a little visibility of my own. So that's part of the reason why I'm here. I was injured in a water skiing accident when I was 22. So it's been a lot of years that I've been dealing with wheelchairs and architectural barriers and ways of getting into buildings and raised toilet seats and, you know, everything there is about barriers. And so I feel like I have some experience in all of that, maybe more as a user than as a designer, but I've seen a lot of poor design, I've seen some good design, and I think I can differentiate between the two. And I'd just like to lend my assistance to the group that's assembled to try to improve the situation in Brookline with regard to the disabled and the situations here with architectural barriers and other barriers. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any, you know, particular problems in town that you want to start in on.
Well, it was interesting. We live in Coolidge Corner, and I noticed a couple of years ago. I noticed that I came up the alley between the CVS and the theater, and I came up and there was a curb cut that went down onto the parking lot there. And then I wanted to go up on the sidewalk that went down towards Beacon Street, the one that goes between Party Favors and I think there's a Century Bank there. But there was no curb cut to go up on that sidewalk. And it seemed like a kind of a flow that you might make, a normal flow that people would make, and people on their feet could do it, but those of us in chairs could not. So I called my friend Dick Benka, and within 2 days I think he spoke with somebody in town, and lo and behold, the ramp was there. And you know, it's just an example of that's an inconvenience, but there are other buildings and so forth in town that certainly need some review and possible upgrades in terms of. Now, I know there's also there's a lot of ADA requirements, and there's also some laws regarding. I think there has to be if you're going to reconstruct a building, there needs to be a percentage of reconstruction over a limit. And therefore, then it would be required to be accessible. But if it's below that limit, then it's not. And I know games can get played with those kinds of rules. Having been disabled though for so long, I have to say that I've seen a tremendous amount of improvement in everything from transportation. I just came home today from work on the T. I normally use the ride, but I use the T today, and it's just so easy to get on the subway and in Copley Square and come home. Just there have been so many improvements, and now I think it's time to use some of the technology that's available to better the situation in the town.
Picking up on that theme, I wonder if the impediments you find to free flow and your movement around are lingering issues from sidewalks or curb cuts that haven't been put in 30 years, or if we're doing a better job with our newly constructed sidewalks, our newly constructed buildings, we sort of just haven't dealt with the previous inventory of mistakes that we made.
We have made a lot of improvements, there's no question about it. In Boston, for example, you can go up on a curb cut at an intersection, and then you can go the entire length of the block, and at the other end of the block where you want to go down a curb cut, there's no curb cut there. And so the choice then is to try to find some place where you can get down on the street again, or go back where you were and go down the street. That doesn't happen in Brookline, which is, you know, good news. So I think a lot of work has already been done in Brookline that I've noticed.
So you've spoken a lot about public sector, about government buildings, government infrastructure. I'm wondering if you see a role for the commission in motivating, educating the private sector, particularly businesses that may have a step up from sidewalk level to get into their.
That's
their
true.
establishment.
Now I would need to understand better what the requirements are for private business. Whether, you know, what role can the town take in can you require, for example, a person who opens a store, can you require them to have a accessible bathroom in there or an elevator? I noticed there's a new bed and biscuit, I think it's called, for
dogs.
For dogs in the arcade building, and I noticed that they have a lift in there that goes from the street level all the way down to the bottom. That's pretty impressive, and I'm sure they didn't put that in there because they felt like it, and I don't know how many dog owners are in wheelchairs either, so.
No, actually, I think that the town, I know something about that renovation, and the town required that.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So obviously, if the town required it, they had the authority to require it, and that's at a great expense for a small business like that.
What you're saying is sounds great to me. I think there's a lot of different ways that we can work with private businesses, and it's not necessarily requiring them to do renovations, costly renovations to fix problems that should be addressed, but just it's not the right time. We can do things like launch a ramp loaner program, or do sorts of things like that to sort of work around. So I look forward. I'm the Selectmen's representative on the commission.
Great.
I look forward to working with you, and I think we can be productive and address a lot of these issues together.
And a lot of the things that can be done are small. They're, like, for example, my accounts are at the Bank of America, right in Coolidge Corner. The bank is completely accessible. There's a teller there at a lower level where I can go in with my wheelchair. There's an ATM that's accessible, but there's no button on the front door. So, there's no way, I have to wait for somebody to either come in or go out, or try to get the attention of the security guard. Now, that's not a big issue or expense for a company like the Bank of America. So, little things like that I think we can all, as we go around town, we can notice and then seek change.
Selectman Heller.
Well, your opening line resonated with me since I served with Marcia on the school committee for many years, so I've always known you as Marcia's husband.
See?
Yes, that's true. But I also have known that you're very articulate and very well versed in these issues. And so I think that you would bring a lot to the commission. I'm curious as to whether you think that the improvements that we made on Beacon Street, specifically when we did that renovation, were sufficient enough. I know that there were issues about the placement of the ramps.
You're talking about the traffic flow, or?
Yeah, to get across the street. We had certain barriers and things that we needed to pay attention to. And how do you experience that when you're out on Beacon Street trying to cross, say, from Harvard, on Harvard?
Most of the traffic lights have the buttons down low for people that, where you can push the pedestrian light and the traffic will stop. There are plenty of places to stop. I can't think of anything in particular that bothers me. I'm not that familiar with the bike paths, but that's not my issue either. That's not the issue that I'm concerned about. But I know the bike paths, I think, tend to change depending on where you are on Beacon Street. No, I think the job was well done, as far as I could tell.
Well, that's good to hear, because at the time there were some concerns, and I think we went back and did some stuff to it to make it better.
As a matter of fact, I noticed up on Beacon Street, beyond Coolidge Corner, between Coolidge Corner and Cleveland Circle, there are some ramps, chair lifts that go from the upper side. There's a temple, I think, up there on the top side, and then they go down to where the T is. That's pretty impressive, because those are not inexpensive pieces of equipment. I don't know how often they get used, but they certainly are available there. So if you got off the train on the lower side and you were in a wheelchair, you could take that stairway lift and go up. Now, again, I don't know whether it's locked or those kinds of things, but so there's certainly many more things that can be done, and I think that a lot of help can be gained from people in the community who know about these issues and can bring them to the forefront in front of the commission, and then we can know about them. So it's eyes and ears out there, everybody.
Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I just had one other question. We were just talking at the the Devotion School Building Committee the other day, and there's a space in the library, and we're very pressed for space. You know, we have lots of kids in town and we're trying to accommodate them. So the library in there is double height. And I was saying, gee, that kind of seems like an awful lot of space that we're not using, and couldn't we have a sort
You
of
mean two-story, like, inside?
Yeah. Couldn't we have a mezzanine study area or something like that? And the architect said, well, handicapped people would have to go exit the library, and there's an elevator fairly nearby, but they'd have to go out, take the elevator upstairs in order to access that. So they didn't think it was acceptable. Is that?
Some of my pals in the disabled community think that I'm a little bit old-fashioned in that way. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if there's a way to get there, and there's an elevator to get there, I'm not inconvenienced by leaving the room and taking an elevator and going up, and then there will be others that could sit right here in their wheelchair and say, absolutely not. If everybody else can do it, then I want to be able to do it, and I want to be able to do it the same way. So I may not be the best person to ask, because I wouldn't push for something like that.
Okay.
I would push, however, if there was no way to get to the second floor.
Yeah.
But if there's a workaround, then it seems reasonable to me.
Wow. Well, thank you. Usually I say we're not making appointments tonight, but I think we are. So, and this is a commission that has some openings and I think needs some revitalization.
I happen to know Sarah Lynn Allaire, and I also know Jim
Masak.
Michak, yeah. And so
So
it'll
we'll
be
look
fun to
forward
work
to
with,
having you.
work with them as well, so.
Okay. So we'll be in touch shortly. Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next item is the snow and ice deficit. Question of invoking Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D, to allow the Department of Public Works to expend funds in excess of the FY 2016 budget appropriation for snow and ice. Commissioner Papasturgeon.
I've got to say, I thought this was the one year we wouldn't see you up here.
Oh, well. It's with mixed feelings I stand here tonight, talking about snow and ice. I mean, yesterday it was 65 degrees out, and believe me, this is one of the best Februaries that I've ever experienced, so.
But it's only February
I'm
2nd.
knocking on wood. I checked the long-range forecast before I came up here to see if there was anything brewing. They can, look ahead. And I don't see anything really for the month of February other than some rain and some small events, so who knows, we'll keep our fingers crossed. But having said all of that, still you realize that we budget very low for snow and ice, realizing that in most years, if not all years, that we're going to have to come before you to invoke Chapter 44, which then allows us to deficit spend the snow and ice account, and then reconcile it later on in the fiscal year with surplus funds from other parts of the budget. This particular year, as of right now, the event that we had last week threw us into deficit. We're about $90,000 in the red right now. And just as a refresher, this time last year I was about $900,000 in the red at this time. And we were trying to clean up about 42 inches of snow. 35 of it which came in the last 3 days. So I think we're in good shape overall. We do have our salt bins full. We keep them full after the experiences that we had last year. I haven't had to use contractors yet this year, but that money is still encumbered in reserve in case we do need to use contractors. But we've been handling everything that we've had lately with town forces. But nonetheless, we are still in deficit, although it's a lot smaller deficit than we've experienced in past years. So I'm asking you tonight to consider, in lieu of a reserve fund transfer, to invoke Chapter 44, Section 31D, to allow us to continue snow and ice operations through the remainder of the winter, and then allow us to reconcile it probably in the month of May or June with surpluses from the remainder of the budget.
And you've confirmed that the beast is working, right?
Both beasts are working, yes. They're ready to go. It's like the old commercial there, you know, the trucks are, got their plows on, waiting at Dunkin' Donuts for the first plate to fall. Yeah, you know, we're ready. I've always told you that we always prepare for the worst, but we hope for the best. So this year so far, we've gotten the best.
Yeah, the beast is a 10-foot wide snow blower that we bought last year. So it clears a 10-foot wide path and blows the snow into a dump truck. It's quite efficient. So, any questions or comments? I'll therefore move that we invoke Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D, to allow the Department of Public Works to expend funds in excess of the FY 2016 budget appropriation for snow and ice control. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
And the next item is pay-as-you-throw update.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Papasturgeon, don't go too far. I may need you, but I wanted to give the board a brief update and then seek your approval on a specific item. As you know, the town has been, for many years actually, been studying the so-called pay-as-you-throw, or the acronym is PATE. And we've had town committees, moderators committees, and department recommendations, but we have some tough decisions to go through, and I decided to convene a task force, and we're taking on these very difficult decisions. We're talking about the size of the bin, you know, how many bins would be allowed, and you know, what we would do for overflow, and how that would all imply or implicate the annual fee. So we have some interesting work to do, but I wanted to say that the notion of automating the solid waste operation is somewhat independent of pay-as-you-throw, although it's related. And one of the reasons why we haven't pulled the trigger and ordered the equipment yet is because we want to make sure there was nothing inconsistent about automation with pay-as-you-throw. And so one of the first things I did when I convened this task force was to consider whether or not anything in automate, or anything that were under consideration in pay-as-you-throw would be inconsistent with automation. And that's very important because, as you know, we've been counting on automation as a budget component of our 3-year override plan and our ability to fund town operations overall. So I did convene the panel, and I think it's fair to say that it was unanimous that we felt that automation, which really involves the acquisition of traditional load packers, but they are fitted with automated equipment. You've seen them, I'm sure, with the way our recycling bins are collected, whereas the mechanical arm that's operated by one individual can go, pull up to the curb, pick up a bin, tip it, put it back, and that's what we have in mind for trash collection. And so it doesn't matter whether that bin is small or big, as long as it's of the same profile and construction, this equipment can do that. And so based on that, we received unanimous consent of the pay-as-you-throw task force that we're ready to go for automation. And so specifically what I'm looking for your vote this evening is to authorize the Public Works Commissioner to acquire the automated sanitation equipment that would be necessary for automation and which has been budgeted. I will say that there is some question, like there was with recycling, for some buildings where there's multifamily dwellings, we make exceptions, we create a workaround, and we would do obviously the same for trash collection, where there's a multiple residents in one facility. We do that, and we know that could be an issue with trash, and we'll deal with that. But by and large, the bins that would be employed would be satisfactory for the automation.
So the decision to purchase the packers, the trucks, is independent of the size of the container.
Size and number of containers.
Right, and that decision on the size is still being
Yeah,
worked
that's really
through.
what we're all about. That's what our task force is all about, the size, how many, what we would do if, if there was overflow, and so on. And so we're tackling those issues, and I'm pretty confident we'll reach some, or at least I'll have a good enough sense to make a formal recommendation with the commissioner.
Selectman Daley.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, and I see you've attached Mr. Papasturgeon's letter, I think it was, of last June,
Yeah.
where he was recommending the really tiny bins.
We have not made a decision about that yet.
Okay, so my question, though, is, well, I think those really tiny ones are too small for most families, but maybe fine for single-family households or possibly even two-family households. But my question is, I have heard from some people that live in more, triple-deckers or more congested areas that they don't want really big ones because they have maybe a narrow storage space, or they have a little area between buildings where they have to wheel it out or something like that. So I thought I read in here somewhere that once you decide on the size of the bin, that's it, and the trucks would be,
No.
can just get one. I mean, right now, we have two different sizes of recycling, and I'm just wanting to make sure that any equipment we buy could have that same flexibility
Yes.
for the trash, because I think some people do want the really tiny ones, but maybe many other people want something a little larger.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah, we use right now 3 different size containers for recycling, 35, 64s, and 96s. The size of the container, as Mr. Clark indicated, is totally independent of the automated equipment. The equipment will pick up anything, and
Okay.
all the logistics of those questions are what's being worked out by the town administrative task force.
So the reason why I'm bringing this up today
Okay.
because we need, there's such a lead time in ordering this equipment and fabricating this equipment that we need to order it now.
For the trucks.
Correct.
Okay, but when we get to the bin discussion, I actually think that this board ought to have a public hearing on that.
Sure, I would expect so.
Because I certainly, last time we were discussing it, I was getting a lot of phone calls and emails, so I think there's a lot of
I would expect that's
interest.
it's going to be a hot topic.
No, I agree. The people on the task force, made sure that there was somebody who represented the whole town. So they, we have persons who are single homeowners, or single, people in their homes and live in a place like that. We have a gentleman who lives in with a large family in South Brookline. So I think we've covered it, but I fully expect that this board would have a public hearing. But the automation decision is something that I'm recommending we take on today because of the lead time. And we ideally, we'd like to get this project going after Labor Day.
Selectman Green.
Yeah, one comment and one question. The current system where people put everything from plastic bags to who knows what out for their household waste seems to be asking for trouble in terms of rats and other vermin. So I assume that putting that waste into these plastic containers will reduce that problem, if it is a problem. I mean, I don't notice that it is, but.
It is.
Yeah, I assume. So that's one.
Certainly is in my neighborhood.
Pardon me?
It's a problem in my neighborhood. Animals get into the things. Yeah.
So I think that's, one reason why, this is an improvement over our current system. I just want to make a note of that. The other thing we're talking about eventually eliminating 3 labor positions. Whenever we talk about eliminating people's jobs, I get a little concerned. I assume that that's going to be done through attrition, or?
That's the goal, yes.
Okay, so what I'd like, we're ready for a motion. Do you want this motion, or just a more
Yes.
general? Okay, so I'm going to move that we authorize the Commissioner of Public Works to procure two 32 cubic yard rubbish packers with automated side loader equipment and to enter into a 3-year lease purchase program as funded in the sanitation program's capital outlay account within the Department of Public Works FY 2016 budget. That was a mouthful. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
So we're buying trucks. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is a public hearing on 1180 Boylston Street. Just a couple of intro remarks. This is the first public hearing of 3 in the coming month on 3 different projects being proposed under Chapter 40B, which is the Commonwealth's affordable housing zoning, where at least 20% of the units in the project must be affordable. And then, if that's done, certain exceptions to our more general zoning can be made. And the process for approval of 40B projects is different than the normal project, which is done under Chapter 40A. So the first phase, and this is the first phase, is the applicant applies to a subsidizing agency, and in this case it's an agency called Mass Housing, and then Mass Housing sends us a letter asking us for comments, and that's what this hearing is about, to present, show the board and the public the project. So, and then we'll hear from the public as to comments. So then we can incorporate those comments into the town's official response back to the subsidizing agency. In addition to the board, a number of town departments have already looked at the proposal and are in the process of formulating their own comments too. And those tend to be more technical. So, Ms. Selko, are you up?
Yes. I'm Polly Selko, Assistant Director for Regulatory Planning. As you said, that consistent with the 40B process, Mass Housing, which is the subsidizing agency, has notified the Selectmen that it's currently reviewing a 40B project at 1180 Boylston Street for its site eligibility. This site, as you know, was a former gas station, and it's at the corner of Route 9 and Hammond Street. The proposal is for a 6-story mixed-use building with retail space on the ground level, 45 age-restricted rental units above, 9 of which will be affordable, and 1 level of underground parking, which will be accessed from Route 9. The development team is here tonight, and it consists of Raj Dahanda, who's the applicant, attorney Rashna Balakrishna, Affordable Housing Bob Engler, and the architect Hario Panja, who will give you a short presentation tonight, which will be an overview of the project. The planning department suggests that at your next week's board meeting, the selectmen discuss and vote on a response to Mass Housing, and the planning department will work on preparing a draft for you, which will incorporate the comments that are heard tonight. The deadline for submitting that is February 12th. If Mass Housing finds the site eligible, the applicant will then submit an application to the town, and the Board of Appeals will have 30 days to open the hearing. The planning department is hopeful that the applicant will work cooperatively with the town on design issues and ways to minimize and/or mitigate impacts that the project may have on abutters in the surrounding neighborhood. And just so you and the public knows, this is the first of several 40B projects the town is going to be seeing. 2 other notification letters have been received from Mass Development, on site eligibility applications, one for additional housing at Hancock Village, for which the Board of Selectmen will hold a hearing next Tuesday on February 9th, and one for 40 Center Street, for which I believe you're thinking of holding a hearing on February 23rd. With that, I will turn the program over to the architect, and he can describe the project to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am going to...
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, I was about to do just that, actually.
Record. Yeah.
My name is Harel Pandya. I'm a principal at CBT Architects, and we've been a part of this project for some time and really excited as to where it's headed. I think as I walk you through some of these images, and there's not very many, but just some of these images to give you a flavor of what we are proposing. I think really one of the components here is, let me just jump ahead a little bit just so we can talk about the overall piece. This is like the, there we go. One of the ideas here really is to talk about the site as an opportunity, sort of a gateway, you know, heading in on the eastbound side, heading towards the city. The slot currently, and it didn't really represent sort of the highest and best use. And one of the things that, you know, Raj had approached us to talk about really was what is some really good opportunities. And I think we've gone through a few iterations of what that could be. And I think at the end, you know, looking at the 40B and kind of really creating something that's sort of a jewel box and a beacon really that kind of announces the gateway, or part of announcing the gateway and continuing the retail approach into the city was really an opportunity that we thought could be really beneficial to the site. It does a few things. It kind of has, you'll see, I'll go backwards a little bit in the plan in a minute, but it has some opportunities where the site peels back and has some outreach to the communities on Hammond, so you can kind of see where the red, I don't know if I have a mouse here, I think I do, where the red umbrellas and stuff are here. You know, this is part of the facade that actually peels back. So it's not, everything is not really coming right up to the lot line, but there's really some opportunity for breadth and relief in certain parts. We wanted to be respectful of the scale in the back, so the building just sort of step you know, away from the corners a little bit, so it's not just all 5 stories, you know, as a volume all the time. We wanted to peel it back, and we also wanted to introduce some warmer tones and materials through you know, wood tones, some warm metal tones, et cetera, to really kind of keep in feeling in the flair of the overall neighborhood. So that's this. We can come back to this image in a second, but I'm just going to go back to the plan, if you will. Oops, sorry. It's thinking. So this is the ground level plan that we have, that we're proposing here, and you can see, I'm trying not to screw this plan up here, but this is the Route 9 side here traveling east in this direction, and that's Hammond Street obviously on the left here, and this is where the traffic light is. So the proposal here, being residential, is we wanted to sort of continue the feel of Hammond Street and propose a residential entry and the lobby off of Hammond Street, where the elevator banks are, and approximately 7,000 square feet of retail that's, you know, could be subdividable if needed. But then on the Route 9 side, this is where essentially you would come into a lift system essentially that would bring you down valet operated down to the parking level, where there's approximately 80 cars that are parked there, and that's with stackers. I have that plan in a minute. But essentially here you can see this is your, you know, sort of access, your valet office, and this corridor with the interesting site shape that we have. But, you know, this brings you back to the main lobby, if you will, and really giving the retail a lot of opportunity to have glass line on both Hammond and Route 9 all the way to have visibility both coming eastbound and going westbound, especially when you're sitting at that light. So all the vehicular access essentially to the site is from, the exit and entry is from here, so we've allowed for some queuing at this area where the drive allows for that, as well as some areas on the parking level where they can queue and the valets can sort of address traffic, and we've worked with parking consultants, et cetera, that feel pretty comfortable with that approach. So that's the ground level, and then the first level of parking essentially is just that. You can see here, this is where the car lifts are. They would come in, they would come down, they would hit the, you know, either the stackers or have 20 spaces that are essentially free within that level to park, and this seems very well within reason of operability and function within the valet services and parking consultant, what they believe to be within reason to operate. So again, back to that ground level. And then as we go up, these are essentially the units, plus or minus a square footage of what the units would be, approximately 9 units a floor, totaling 45 units as mentioned previously, and a mixture between 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, and maybe some variance thereof. But it's pretty much what we're showing right now as far as market demand and what folks are looking for. And again, the opportunity to have a fair amount of glass visibility and creating a really sort of nice experience when you're in the building, being able to look out and kind of look over at the cricket club and some other areas and really kind of have some beautiful visibility. Materiality, like I said before, is really focused on warmer tones of materials. Some of these elevations, because of the canted nature of the site, are a little bit askew, but you can see that there's at least some opportunity for roof decks, especially when you get to the upper levels, so we can peel back some of the units as they go up. So again, trying not to create a more variegated facade, if you will, all the way around, with the more solid sides being on the back, which is on the southern side of the building. But the more compelling picture here, really trying to embrace the corner, really trying to actually create a corner, trying to create a destination. I know there's a lot of people crossing the street there with the crosswalks and whatnot. It's really sort of nice to be able to get across and get to something that hopefully is a pleasant retail experience. And again, the pedestrian connection back down and through Hammond Street would be really sort of a nice way to cap, if you will, the Hammond Street experience.
Good evening. My name is Bob Engler of SEB. I'm the 40B consultant. You'll probably see me at a couple of other nights, but I just want to mention on the affordability, we're dealing with 9 units for people earning 50% of medium or less. We had a choice of going to 80% or 50. We felt that obviously with only 9 units, there's a need on both ends, but having a lower income tier for seniors, because this is age restricted for both the market and affordable units, it gives folks in Brookline a great chance to have a rental situation when they have limited income relative to the market conditions in this community. So that's the way we programmed it, scattered throughout, so nobody knows who's living where in terms of income. The units will all be the same, and that's the goal here of 40B. We will have a long process going through with the zoning board. We look forward to that and going from there. So we're happy to answer any questions.
These are all rentals, right?
They're all rental. So they all count if that's a consideration. 45 units is not a great deal, but they all count on the town's inventory.
Correct.
I've got 2 questions right off the bat, and will reserve my right to ask future questions. One, on the 80 parking spaces, is there some thought about the divide between the retail tenant and the rental units, what the split between them is going to be?
Well, we've allocated 67 spaces for the residential component, but I think we'll have to play that out because it depends on who the retail tenants are, which haven't been signed up yet, obviously. So whether there's 3 of those tenants or 1, or what their demands are, it's somewhat in flux until we really see what the situation is. We think we certainly have enough parking for everybody. The question of the allocation will have to be worked out.
And then you gave me a great segue to my second question. What type of retail tenant are you looking to attract? Either with the 7,000 square feet, or should you choose to subdivide? What are you looking to provide as a community amenity?
I'll let Raj speak to that. He's been looking at that.
Can you come to the podium?
Sure. My name is Raj Danda. I'm the developer of this project. And to answer your question on what type of retailers, we expect that space will be divided 2, 3, possibly as many as 4 small retailers, lower intensity retailers. The one on the Hammond Street side, we're hoping would be some sort of a coffee shop that the folks in the neighborhood could
come and use, and that's why we have a setback on that side with umbrellas and all for them to sit, enjoy the experience of being there. I don't anticipate that there would be big retailers.
Any other questions from the board before we open it up?
Yeah,
Selectman Daley?
somebody sent us an email, and one of her questions was, if the situation with the parking is things are going on lifts up and down, I presume that's not where you would expect somebody's moving van to go into, when they're coming or going. Where do you anticipate things like that happening?
Loading things.
Loading, yeah. Okay.
That's quite a wide driveway. That is about 20 feet?
17, 18 feet.
17, 18 feet. That's a very wide driveway.
Any other questions before I open it up?
Yes, I do have one question. Have you done any site analysis? Do you know of any environmental issues below grade?
While there's been environmental mitigation going on for a while, they continue to the sellers of this property, which is Cumberland Farms. They have continued obligation to keep doing the testing of the water. There's some spots there where they check it, and every month I get a report of it. I believe it's supposed to continue for another 6-7 years, I think. However, there is no problem, so to speak, environmentally on the site.
This is a very busy area. We frequently hear from neighbors about the long traffic queues and so forth. So have you done any analysis on what the traffic impacts will be of the cars coming out of your building?
We had done a traffic study for a earlier different use proposal. We will be doing that, the traffic study for this proposal. Based on what traffic consultants have told us, certainly compared to what a gas station generates in terms of frequency and intensity of use, housing with 55 and over, and many of them being where the location is, will probably not have vehicles, and the traffic will not be condensed into a short period of time. So it'd be very spread out, we think. And many people, we don't think, will own vehicles. We haven't explored fully yet, but my thought is that we might have a zip car there for people who don't have cars. And so we think that, frankly, 80 spaces, which include many lifts, meaning one on top of another, that sort of a setup. I don't think we'll get anywhere close to using them. So I think the traffic here is going to be far less benign than a gas station produces, and many other uses that might. As you know, given the location, half the people will roll out of their bed and go to the supermarket or walk down to one of the shopping centers and maybe not even think of using their car if they have one. And of course, you know that there's public transportation right at the door, a couple of hundred yards away there's T. So all that says to me is that the traffic is going to be absolutely minimal, and certainly a lot better than what a gas station produced on this site.
Selectman Franco?
I have a two-part question. I noticed that in the renderings, there's some thought given to stepping back the building particularly in the upper stories. My first question is, have you done a shadow analysis, and can you share, if you have done that analysis, what the impact is going to be on the surrounding buildings? And then my second question, part two of the question is, where are the mechanicals anticipated to be? And if they're going to be on the roof, do you have a sense of how much height that's going to add to this already six-story building?
The mechanicals are more than likely contained.
Can you,
The mechanical systems are probably more than likely contained within the units. There might be some additional rooftop units, but they would be contained within the building, not adding any additional height. So there'd be a central location, sort of part of the core of the building that essentially would sit on top of the things that are also akin to that. Would be elevator override, stair head house, et cetera, would all be within a screened, setback components from the street level would be not very visible, if at all. And as far as the shadow studies are concerned, they're underway. We're happy to share with you what they are when they're complete. Obviously, it's going from a one-story building to a six-story building, so there's shadows. But considering south is that way, they're mainly on Hammond more than the neighbors. Sorry.
Selectman Green?
I'm sorry.
No, Selectman
Okay.
Green.
That is a very, very busy corner. Traffic is very, very thick, especially during certain times of the day, and not just in the morning and evening rush hours. So how are you going to organize and manage the equipment and trucks that you bring in during construction? I mean, I don't see any room there for that type of
Yeah, I mean,
that type of problem.
that would definitely be something that we would bring a contractor involved. I mean, everyone that we've ever worked with has dealt with sites tighter and busier than this, so we're incredibly familiar with that process. And the contractors that we would use would be required to be, knowing how to complete a project given the location and the busyness of it. So there's probably a phasing plan, a staging plan, and a siting plan that would be a part of ultimately bringing the contractor on board to make sure we're impacting as minimally as possible.
And that would be part of the building permit process.
Yeah.
Selectman Heller?
The building does seem rather large for this area, and I'm wondering, it also seems very close to the street. I don't see much sidewalk there. And I'm wondering how much distance you estimate that you're going to be putting there.
All this is sidewalks. All the trees and stuff that are there, they're to remain. And as I mentioned earlier, the peel back here, for example, widens the sidewalk even further. So this is actually probably even 20 feet, if not a couple of feet wider, just at this location alone. And then as we move along, the sidewalk is still maintained that's there today. So the lot line obviously doesn't exceed beyond it. And even the doors themselves are contained within the lot line. So there's a further setback of at least 3 feet to accommodate door swings within our property line itself. So there's still a fair amount of sidewalk. I would say there's at least 13 feet, if not more, along 9. And then, as I said, even though Hammond's sidewalk, existing sidewalk, is a little bit narrower, there are moments of relief as we're not going directly to the lot line. And then there's an increased sort of opening here, as well as the entry to the residential component.
So now that you have this drawing up, where's the loading area that you were referring to?
So the drive outlets here would be here, and again, this is right around 17'4", plus or minus, depending where you're taking this dimension from. But there's enough room for, and we would, as a residential building, would probably, require hours like other units in urban areas, buildings in urban areas, as to when, loading and trash and moving trucks, et cetera, would have to sort of comply with using the drive aisles. So, I mean, that's just a control operations scenario.
Is that both in and out? So people are going to be coming in and out?
And
So
there's a
there's-
valet, so they'll be able to maintain traffic flow to make sure we're not blocking and precluding any access.
Okay, well, this is a public hearing, and keep in mind that there's going to be a lot of process from this point forward, so I guess we're looking for general impressions about massing, the project itself, the concept. In terms of design details, design materials, that's probably not our purview, though if you have comments, certainly give them to us. But, so is there anyone who wishes to speak? So, introduce yourself.
I'm Jerry Lazar. I live on Craftsland Road. I've lived in the neighborhood for almost 46 years now in the same house. We have witnessed during that 46 years a lot of development in the area. Some of it has been pretty horrendous. A number of neighbors have been very actively involved in the design process, and some things have been built that are rather ugly and imposing. I think this is a wonderful project, actually. I think the use that you are planning makes a lot of sense. It's a wonderful location with that sort of thing. What concerns me is when you look at the drawings from the street, from across Route 9, looking at the building, it looks quite massive. It's a big building, and I suppose some of that could be dealt with through the appearance by choosing materials carefully. But I'm wondering whether, in some ways, the facade can be stepped back. Now, it may be early to talk about this, but it's in the design process. And it's a massive building for that corner. It's a lot of open space around it, and when you're looking at it, at least from the drawings, it's quite imposing. It's just big. And I would think that it would make a lot of sense for the way the neighborhood looks and for the community to alter the design in some way so that it was a little less imposing, given the size and number of units and everything. Whether that's with setbacks or materials, I don't know. But I assume there would be a design advisory team that would meet with the developers.
Yeah, that would be up to the ZBA
down the road
The
to talk about
planning
it.
board,
But at this planning stage, I would hope that that can be taken into consideration and the basic facade can be modified.
Yeah. I'm going to suggest that you and others who are interested in this pay particular attention to when this goes before the planning board, which, do we know
The
yet?
process is a little different, Selectman Daley.
Oh, okay. It doesn't go to the planning board?
Well, it does, but the ZBA is going to be the driver.
Comprehensive permit.
It's a
Okay,
comprehensive
so
permit.
where is the appropriate place for
So,
them
yeah.
to bring design questions? I'm going to ask Ms. Steinfeld, our planning director, to answer that.
Thank you. Under 40B, the whole concept is a comprehensive permit.
Okay.
So everything is under the control of the ZBA. If what the ZBA will do will solicit comments from all boards within the town. And at that point, the planning board can provide comment. If the ZBA and the developer would like to go beyond the traditional ZBA process, under 40B, and work with the planning board or work with a committee, then certainly that we could work that out. But 40B does not require it, and it preempts the 40A process. So
Okay.
there is no DAT. There is no review before the planning board unless there is agreement amongst both the ZBA and the developer that they will forego some of the traditional 40B process.
Okay, so a design concerns like Mr. Lazar's, would you suggest then that that you can certainly tell us, but we don't really deal with design stuff. So I'm trying to figure out what is the right place to tell them to bring their concerns.
In the public hearing before the ZBA.
Okay.
Right.
And do we-
Unless, again, if the ZBA and the developer decide.
Do we know when that's going to be?
Assuming Mass Housing issues a project eligibility letter, then the developer will at some point apply for a comprehensive permit to the town. Once that permit is, once the application is received, the ZBA has 30 days to schedule the first public hearing.
But will that be on our website or something? So-
Everything will be on the
Yeah,
website. And as a matter of fact.
Can anyone sign up to be notified of, are we setting up an email list for this particular project?
That will be under discussion in that we have 3 before us at this point. That we will have 3 40Bs before
Okay.
us. We're going to try to put as much information on the on the website as possible, but personal notifications might become a little difficult. Staffing, from a staffing perspective.
Okay. But folks can sign up for general ZBA notices.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
And they would be notified of the ZBA hearing.
Okay, so that's one way to ensure that you're notified. And you would do that by going to the town website and...
There's a way to
right.
subscribe to various notifications. I believe, I forget exactly, Brook Online, I think, is the
Right.
Brook Online suite of applications where
Yeah.
you can put your email address and you'll be notified of all ZBA notices.
Right.
Automatic.
Right, so yes, that's the
By
way to...
email.
Right, that's the way to ensure that you're notified. And
And
then,
the-
of course, abutters
right.
abutters will also automatically be notified by statute.
Correct. 40B still protects the abutters
Right,
in that regard.
and then all town meeting members for the surrounding precincts will be notified, neighborhood associations, so the word will get out.
But the other thing we should explain to people is when somebody brings forth a project under the affordable housing statute, they can override some of our local zoning controls. And, that will be for the ZBA to decide how much pushback they're going to give them. But I'm sure, though, that it's certainly appropriate for you to bring your concerns there and have that discussion. And we're certainly willing to hear them tonight. It's just that I just want to make sure that you get your concerns to the right people, because honestly, we don't really do design here.
And perhaps...
And believe me, you don't want me doing design.
Yeah. But there's, the Board of Selectmen could certainly contain in its letter to Mass Housing something to the effect of that we would hope that the developer will work with the ZBA to refine the design, something along those lines. You certainly don't have to be specific, but encourage Mass Housing to request the applicant to work with the town to incorporate design changes that perhaps better accommodate the neighborhood. You're not limited in your response.
Right.
So bring your concerns forward.
No.
Come on, you have to come up to the microphone, sorry.
So anybody that wants to be notified about zoning board of appeals meetings in the future, you would go to the town website, brooklinema.gov. On the left side of the website, there's a button under the Brook Online, series of icons that says "Notify Me." You would click on that, put your email address in the form at the sort of middle of the page there, and you will have the opportunity to select the particular meetings or issues that you want to be informed about. And the Zoning Board of Appeals will be one of those options, along with the Board of Selectmen, the Advisory Committee, the Commission on Women, all of the various boards and commissions.
Yeah, just be careful, because you can start getting a lot of email. Yes, ma'am.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Why don't you tell us your name?
My name is Julie Gross. I'm a trustee at 629 Hammond Street, so living very close to this large unit, building that's coming up. I have a lot of concerns. I guess my first question is, because I'm not that familiar with the 40B, is do the exemptions, and I don't know what all the exemptions for the zoning are for 40B, but does that apply to a mixed use house? So there's retail and housing? So it applies to that. So, I'll just express that I'm really concerned with the size of this and the design of this building. It seems to have gotten bigger since, at least taller than, what the previous proposal was. I drive in and out of work from Boston every day. I'm stuck on Route 9 going east. I'm concerned people coming east or coming west, how are they going to get into the building? A couple of other things I've just kind of jotted down are, where are the people going to park for retail? Where will visitors park? We have a visitor parking lot, and I can just see people wanting to go to the coffee shop and parking in our visitor parking lot. what is being addressed for the traffic situation? Are they thinking about widening the roads, which I think I know the answer to that, but, it's a mess there already. And they did a lot of work with Wegmans and all that coming, but there's a lot squeezed into, 2 blocks of Route 9. And I mean, I had another concern about the moving trucks. I think with the fact that it's rental property, there's going to be a lot of moving in and out. And it seems, I know you kind of said you'll time all this, but I'm not sure exactly how the logistics work with that and how the backup with people getting in with the loading and the unloading of the spots below, how that's all going to work. But I guess my major concern is it's really just the size and the scale of the building.
Most of those detail questions is probably, we can make a note of it, but that would be a later phase. Certainly, the size of the project will be noted in our comments.
Just kind of wanted to get all that out, but.
Sure. But yes, be sure to raise those issues at in the ZBA process. That would be the appropriate time for that.
Did you have a question?
Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And by the way, you can also submit written comments to us, and that's a way to get into more detail and say whatever you want to say. Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Catherine Gerson, and I'm representing 1162, 1164 Boston Street, which is the closest neighbor of this proposed construction. So, as it already was mentioned here before, about the height of this building.
Can you step a little closer to the microphone?
Okay,
Thank you.
It's going to be around 70 feet tall, and it will obviously dwarf everything else in that area. So any buildings that are substantially taller than the 40-foot maximum shouldn't be that in that area. The survey seems to indicate this before. So standard 3-story building should be there. And I don't even mention that it's going to decrease value of all surrounding properties, because it will be like looking bad in this comparison to this. Then also, it's already, again, was mentioned about traffic. So we live next to this building, which is going to build on this area, and we live in affordable housing too. This is condominium, which was actually town of Brookline actually was selling it, sold it to us. We have 6 units building, and we don't have parking spaces of our own, so we have to park next to the building, actually on the street. And my question is, I understand that all that traffic, which is going to be back and forth next to our building, very close, because it's 6 feet distance between our property and that building, just 6 feet, maybe 8, no more. So I'm just wondering, when residing vehicles or visiting vehicles or commercial vehicles, there wouldn't be any space for our cars. It is already a problem, even because it's inevitable that we have problem with parking now. So even if we need to, it's actually very difficult to put our car during the day already. And easy task as simple as bringing the groceries after the shopping or escorting an elderly relative to our building. It's very difficult already now. And I want to mention, I understand it's age-restricted building, what is proposed, but 70% of residents in our building is the same age, over 60. So I'm just wondering how it would affect us And I understand it's not in good way. Also, what else? Yeah, it's again about parking. Addition of 45 units will create large amounts of this air pollution. We already have Route 9, you know what is it. It's kind of difficult. And our building is, we live there for 17 years, almost. And I'm wondering, being so close to this place now, it's going to make it even worse. So how it will go? So this proposed driveway, it's going to be 6 or 8 feet from our building. So from our bedroom, actually, bedroom windows. I'm just wondering, how was it actually researched, how the air quality would change this building? I think to the worst. So quality of life for our residents are getting to be affected in a bad way. What else? I just read very carefully all those papers, that link we received, and I can see that it says that the closest housing is 400 feet from this development, which is not true. We are much closer than 400 feet. And my understanding that there is something else. Our building is very close, and all those pictures I can see, I don't see our building. It seems like it doesn't exist at all. So I just I'm wondering, because it's so small, probably, but it's just not seen. Even on those, like, this stuff, I can see even the box for switching street light, but there is no our building. So there is nothing like we don't exist. And
Is that little kind of half a line, is that your building?
This is the fence to our property.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah. So also, again, looking in this draft, I could see that all ventilation and electrical boxes should be on the back of the building. It's exactly when we have our porches for our building. So I don't even know, because the quality of life is getting very bad for our residents with this development.
Okay.
I'm not against, I understand that it's a very good idea and affordable and everything. We live in affordable and we think it's great.
Okay, I'm not quite clear on something you said. Do you guys actually pull off the street and park on that?
On the right.
You park in between your building
We
and?
don't have parking.
You don't have parking?
We park on the street, on Route 9.
So when you said you were concerned about parking, you were thinking that their tenants or people trying to use the retail might take up the on-street
Definitely.
parking spaces, and then you would not have a place to park?
Yes.
Okay.
We already have this problem because nearby businesses, there are like Japanese restaurants, there is Mario Taylor, there are different small businesses, banks and everything.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate for us to put in our comments that the applicant should identify and examine the effects on the immediately adjacent properties and take appropriate mitigation.
Yeah, and you should certainly, in terms of where ventilation systems and things like that are, you should certainly go to the Zoning Board of Appeals meetings and bring that up, because that's the kind of thing they might say should be adjusted. So make sure you find out when those meetings are and go to them.
Yeah, I hope I will get notice in time, because this notice for this hearing came on Saturday.
Yeah.
It was very short notice.
Do you have a computer?
Yes, of
Okay.
course. I sent you email. You should
Okay.
have it.
Well, Selectman Franco was just telling you how you can get computer notices when the Zoning Board of Appeals is meeting. So you go on the Town of Brookline's website, and where did you go from there?
Yeah.
On the left side, and you go to Brook Online, and it says notify me. And then you click on that, and then you select the boards that you want to be notified about. And you would click on
Zoning Board of
Definitely
Appeals.
will do that. And also, this is not related, but I just, we are very unhappy with this new ownership. I don't know, it's probably almost 2 years. So we had like problem last winter because you know very well that Brookline laws, Article 7.7, Section 771, require proper snow removal. So last year, snow wasn't removed from the sidewalk even single time. I understand it was a lot of snow. I have a picture on my phone. It's small, I can't show you.
What you should do on that is, on the Brook, if you have a smartphone,
Yes,
you
I
can,
do.
you can get the Brook Online app, and then you just take a picture, hit the send button, and it goes to the right department for enforcement.
I did it last year. I did it last winter, but I don't know, I didn't get any response on that. But you know, our residents were walking on Route 9. That's only was way to get out of the house. And I don't really understand. Then we had another problem. There was a storm like last summer, and piece of tree, which is actually belongs to this property, just fell, like the whole top of the tree, fell down on our porch. And we had to take it for our expense. So I think, like, there are some bad trees on that property. I think it should be taken care of by the owner. It's not our business to do it but our building is under, like, it's dangerous for our building.
Okay, then what you should do.
So it's kind of
is-
negligence.
Right, this isn't the forum for that.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that whole thing is kind of getting us upset. because
Yeah,
you can't imagine-
I understand.
can't
Well, we will remind the owner, you are responsible to clear the sidewalks if there's any snow. And whether you're occupying that site or not, if you own it, you have to clean those sidewalks. Okay?
It was just a nightmare last year.
Okay.
Can
No,
we
not
direct,
because it was a lot of snow. Just
We
because
can
it was-
direct them
can we direct them to where to call?
The building
to-
department.
Okay.
Okay, so it's just kind of, it shows negligence to.
Well,
surrounding-
not just snow, I mean, the trees falling on the
That's-
property, the commercial vehicles, et cetera.
I would start with the building department,
Okay.
and then they can, yeah.
Would you like us to respond or comment?
No. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next person, all right, okay. Hi.
My name is Hedva Kobus, and I'm also 629 Hammond Street property. And I want to speak to two things. One is just to add my voice and support to the comments that have been made by others who are concerned about the size of the project and the things that that size makes happen. And then in terms of specificity, I'd just like to say that I'd like to apply some real life to the plan. For example, you've mentioned that it is a very busy corner, and everyone agrees that it is. And it's a very busy corner, even without the gas station. I heard a lot about this is less traffic than a gas station. Well, right now, there's nothing at that corner. There's no gas station, there's not anything. And all the things that everyone has been talked about the issues of the crowding and of the traffic, are there with nothing on the corner. So I think that the comparison to the gas station really doesn't help us here with our dialogue. And the other thing is that the size of the building then requires what is a relatively unusual way of parking the cars. We're talking about one driveway that's going to have to accommodate not only construction, but moving in and out and cars in and out. And you're dependent then on a valet, and you're dependent on the stacking of cars. And when we're doing other studies, I would be very interested in a time and motion study of parking cars. It certainly is going to take a lot more space on the street and traffic and time to be parking at this proposed building than it is to zip in and out of the parking lot across the street that services the CVS and the grocery store. So I know a lot of this is specificity that you have said we should put in at other times. This may not be the appropriate time. But I just do want you to know that there are many, many of us who have this experience and feel that way. And then I do have one question. You mentioned that you can override some of the zoning, given the special nature of the use of the building. Does that mean that all zoning can be overridden?
I'm going to ask,
Thank you very much.
The applicant may seek waivers to override all zoning under 40B.
But the zoning board of appeals can consider
Denying a waiver.
denying the waivers, right? So they can consider things like traffic and issues like that,
and massing and.
massing and,
They may consider it, but if the zoning board of appeals either denies the application or imposes what are perceived as potentially onerous conditions, the applicant may appeal that decision to the Housing Advisory Committee on the state level, and in all likelihood, the HAC will uphold the applicant. It is a very strict law. It is a law designed to create affordable housing, and therefore it usurps local control over zoning.
Ms. Khan?
Janice Khan, town meeting member in precinct 15, and also I live on Craftsland Road, so not very far from this proposed development. And I'm of at least two minds when it comes to this project. There is a lot to like about it. For one thing, it aligns with Brookline's zoning that encourages a vibrant streetscape by having first floor commercial and residential above. So that makes sense to me for this area. I mean, what we're getting in our area right now along Route 9 is the opposite of a vibrant streetscape. We're just getting bank after bank after bank after bank. And we look across to Newton, and Newton has this vibrant sort of life going on there. So, you know, I like the idea of bringing some vibrancy to Chestnut Hill Village on the Brookline side. Another thing I like about it is that it brings diversity to our housing stock. I don't believe there's another 55-plus development within Brookline, and I think that's a good thing to give other options for people who want to remain in town and maybe downsize is a nice thing. And also, this particular property is going from 3 curb cuts to 1 curb cut, which is also a good thing in terms of pedestrian safety. So, I mean, those are all things I like. I am a little concerned, like everybody else, about how this actually fits into our neighborhood. It does not, it will tower over everything in the area. And I think that there are some, maybe with design elements, we can kind of make some of that massing disappear. Maybe I leave that to people more talented than I am to figure it out. But that is a concern. And the woman who spoke earlier, who is a direct abutter, I am a little concerned about that property because that was bought through our inclusionary zoning. And that is affordable housing, and shouldn't people who live in affordable housing have the same access to light and air and that we would expect all our residents to have? And it is very, very close to that house. They don't have a driveway separating them from, they will have the driveway on the proposed development, but they don't have their own driveway. That would add a little bit of an extra buffer zone to them. So, you know, that does concern me. I will go on record as saying that. I think our hope is that we will be able to work with this developer. I would like to see this not end up being appealed to the state agency, which, as our planning director said, will no doubt just be approved at that level. I would really like to see the neighborhood involved in this process in a positive way, and I do believe that we can achieve that with this developer. I'm hopeful that will indeed happen. The one other issue that hasn't been brought up yet, and I don't know, I took a look at the material that's online. I know that there were they did a lot of boring on that. There is a house right now on part of the property where they couldn't do borings, I think, within that existing building. And I think it would be really important to find out what's there, since if it is ledge, our area has a lot of ledge in it, it would require blasting, and that also would have to take into consideration the abutters who would be most affected by the blasting. Again, I'm hopeful that this will add vibrancy to our neighborhood. I am hopeful that we can, work with the developer and bring something positive to our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, sir? Come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Elias Delaney, and I am the owner of 612, 614 Hammond Street, which is the direct abutter of the property in question here. I'm not opposed to this project, but like other members here have spoken, I'm concerned about the already heavy traffic on Hammond Street. And I already have some significant difficulties of my own tenants and my own customers in my office building and 612 Hammond Street of finding parking spaces. I request that any favorable action or recommendation by the board also contain a condition that the applicant will provide adequate functional parking for his residential tenants, his commercial tenants, and their expected customers. I'm most concerned that customers of the retail tenancies will park on the street and dash in and out and not use the valet parking system that seems very inefficient and timely to do so. And that's a major concern. One of the neighbors already expressed concern that there already was a tight parking on street there. I concur highly. And I think that's my major concern with it. And aside from that, I think we need to do something in that corner that enhances our community. It's a question of what's appropriate and what will best fit everyone's needs and uses. Thank you.
Just to be clear again, we don't issue any conditions. That's going to be the Zoning Board of Appeals, so make sure you bring your concerns to them.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Deborah Ancherica. I live at 1140 Boylston Street, about 3 doors down. I also think that this building is way too big for the area. There's nothing around us that's higher than 3 stories. I'm also concerned with the driveway being on Route 9, that it comes in and out. It's shortly after the light, which is already, it's got a lot of traffic to begin with, so if somebody is pulling in a truck or a car, and some people don't drive real efficiently, so it takes time, which then blocks the traffic even more. I just think it's a tough intersection to begin with, and this is just going to cause more of backup and traffic jam, being right after a light. As far as parking for the businesses, I don't think that they're going to be using the stacking parking, that they're going to park on the street, which isn't helpful to people that do have to use the street to park. The businesses that go in, I'm concerned, we already have a little coffee shop restaurant. So if you put somebody else in there, that could knock them out of business that's been in our neighborhood already. So I'd like to think that they would consider what's already there before they rent to people that may be of the same, like putting in a coffee shop. We have one, we have a Pete's, we certainly don't need a third one on one block. It's mostly the traffic, I think, and the size of the building that I'm concerned with.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Hello, my name is Sergei Shafransky, and I'm owner of the first floor of the building next to it. So my window's looking right at the future project. So I have two concerns. The first of all, the traffic. It's the biggest one because I have kids who go into school. When people come out, when they look into Route 9 to see if they can go, and they start making their move, did they look to the right when the kids come out from that side? Nobody does. So the regulations of that traffic should be done first of all. The second of all, the distance between building, maybe my wall, my windows on the first floor, and the future so-called 6-height fence, which they're planning to put it over there to divide traffic. I mean the driveway between them. Do you think I don't have enough the Route 9 to get another highway next to me? So everything, it's no open windows, it's no fresh air could be over there because the cars will move in right on the window. It's going to be no lights because 6 feet high fences will be blocking my windows basically. And the distance between the edge of those properties and our building, it's 8 feet. Official 8 feet. So the fence which is staying right now there, to my wall, it's a 6 feet. So you think 6 high feet, you know, I mean, whatever the. So this is the second concern. And of course, it's beautiful that people want to build something over there compared to what we got over there right now. It's very awesome and it's very nice. But I think our concern should be taken into attention as a developer and also as a board too. So please, have a good day.
Excuse me. Could we, in our letter, could one of the things we say is that we want to make sure that there are significant safety devices to warn pedestrians and also cars to look. I mean, he's right, you know, people aren't looking in that direction because it's one way, and when people are walking by, it can be very dangerous. So I would worry about pedestrians coming, I guess that direction is outbound. Let me just say outbound, because they're going to, the cars are going to be looking at the eastbound, at the inbound traffic. So I would hope that there can be some requirement for that.
Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
I'm Jaak Wilms. I live at 629 Hammond Street, close to this building. Let's see, is this on?
It's on.
I just have some questions. The main question I think that many of us have is, why does it have to be so big? Who is actually, is a state agency going to own this building?
Nope.
But nevertheless, the state seems to be total control. Some state board is in total control of the design. Is this what I'm hearing?
No, not quite. There's a state law which is trying to encourage affordable housing. So if people are willing to build a building with a certain amount of affordable housing in it, they give them this incentive that they can override most of our local zoning requirements.
Would that be overriding people's concerns also, that it's like twice too big? Like if you cut off the 3 top floors, maybe it's enough? I mean, who is going to own this building and who is going to manage it?
I assume are you keeping ownership of the building? Yes.
Do these people have any experience with this kind of development and
I believe he
running
owns
these
another
buildings?
number of properties around town already.
Do they, what is their reputation? That's another question.
We're not dealing with that here.
So what if it doesn't work? What if it's built this size and it doesn't work and it's a problem? then they go away and we're stuck.
Yeah,
Well, that's every building.
yeah, that could be any building, but, you know, it's only 45 units, which is not
Only-
that big by Brookline.
But
Well,
then
by Brookline's,
why
no,
does
I'm
it-
just saying, you know,
The question
Okay.
I have, why can't it be 3 stories or 4 stories high? Why does it have to be 6 stories high? And why,
yeah, I don't
and the other thing is, where's the trash and the recycle trucks going to go?
Well, that's,
How is the building going to work with this little tiny driveway back in there? I mean,
Right.
it's just,
right. We can put comments about the driveway, and
Okay, that's
what I'm going
why-
to do is sum up what I've heard to help our planning department draft a letter on our behalf, and then a lot of those questions, a lot of the detailed design questions are going to be in the next phase. In terms of the size, the state law guarantees certain levels of profitability. And the theory is that that you have affordable units and then market rate units, and the market rate units subsidize the affordable units, so the state law guarantees certain levels of profitability which drive size. And the
how do
zoning...
they drive size, excuse me? I mean-
It drives the number of units, it drives, because you need a certain number of units to subsidize the affordable units, and the state law guarantees a certain level of profitability. And the Zoning Board of Appeals has the right, and I would hope that they exercise that right, to ask for pro forma financial statements, so that the developer can prove that the massing that they're asking for is appropriate.
It's justified also. Okay, thank you.
So, you know, the state law allows for overriding our zoning, and that's just the way it is. Talk to your legislator about
To
changing
be
that law.
truthful, most of us here don't really like it either, but we have to live with it. So we're trying to do what we can to mitigate the impacts, but it's not so easy.
Ms. Steinfeld? Did I misstate anything?
No, absolutely not. I do want to give you some hope, though. It's not a fait accompli. There are adjustments that we hope the ZBA will request. Certainly, the Planning Department, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, will encourage the ZBA to do so. And I do trust that the developer, particularly one with such strong roots in Brookline, will be willing to work with us to make some modifications to incorporate. I see the owner nodding his head. So I do think if we all work together with the ZBA and the developer, it can be a better development. And so,
Right.
thank you.
So the things that I heard that I would hope the planning department includes in the draft that we're going to be discussing next week are impacts on the very immediate abutters, especially the closest abutter to the east on Route 9, including the impacts of the location of the driveway. We heard a lot of comments about the massing and the size of the building and the height and the number of units and the level of the square footage of the commercial spaces is driving that. So that would have to be looked at too. We've heard a lot of comments about the traffic and especially the impacts on Hammond and Route 9 and the location of the garage and visibility of pedestrians in the as cars are entering and leaving, making sure that pedestrians are safe either through whatever can be done to enhance visibility or some kinds of notification devices, though we have to be very careful about sound devices that emit noise. An example of that is the bank at next to Trader Joe's, where that loud buzzing occurs. We wouldn't want that in a residential area. I have concerns about the parking design and how the driveway is going to work and how the valet is going to work, especially for the short-term parking for the retail. We heard concerns about the geotech, making sure the site is clean. Any other concerns that I missed?
One woman mentioned that it towers over everything.
That's the height and size, yeah. Right. I think on the positive, I think it has the potential of bringing some life to the street in an area that needs it. I like the idea of 55-plus housing. One of our big concerns is the impact on the schools, the fact that there's going to be a street presence, and reducing the curb cut count from the current 3 to 1. So I think this project has a lot of really positive potential with some appropriate adjustments and great design. And so I would like our letter to have a positive tone, but make the appropriate note. Let the state, let Mass Housing know of our appropriate concerns. Does that summarize pretty much?
Yeah.
Our
Yes.
feeling?
Consider a draft letter next week.
Right, and we'll consider a draft letter next week, and we'll have a discussion amongst the board. Okay, so.
I just
Yes.
want to make a brief comment
Sure,
to the
please.
developer. I have to agree with many of the neighbors about your parking for the retail uses. If I was going to your retail store, and I'm driving by, there's no way I'm going to get my car in line to be taken in the elevator, and, that just takes too long if I'm trying to stop in at a store or something like that. So if you can find a way to tuck in some parking spaces for those short-term, to get, so that, because it is very difficult to find an on-street parking space in that area, and it means those retail customers are going to be competing with all the other places that have already been struggling with this parking issue for a while. And I really don't, it's realistic to use the elevator thing if you live in the building and you're going to be there for a while. But I'm telling you, as a customer, there's no way I would go through that process to run into a store and then come out and have to wait a half an hour or something to get my car back. So,
Yeah, okay.
anyway, so that's my advice, to think about that.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I think I'm closing the public hearing. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, last items on the calendar is boards and commission appointments.
Yes.
Mr. Kleckner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 4 committees to consider this evening. The first is the Commission on the Disabled. There are expiring terms, but
Can you please, we still have some business, so if you can keep it down. Thank you.
So the first is the Brookline Commission for the Disabled. We have some incumbents, but we're not going to deal with those tonight. We're going to be dealing with the vacancies. There are 4 new candidates, and there are sufficient vacancies. So I will just read off the names. Myra Burloff.
Aye.
Aye. Robert Heist.
Aye.
Elaine Ober.
Aye.
Henry Winkleman.
Aye.
Thank you.
And then how are we allocating their terms?
I would suggest 18 for Burloff and Heist, 17 for Ober, and 2016 for Winkleman, but that's just the way they appear on the list. I'm happy to change those around if you'd like.
No,
Seems reasonable.
I think that's appropriate.
Okay, now we move to the Preservation Commission, and there is only one vacancy, but we have two applicants. So I will read the names off in order that they appear. So you vote for one of these two. David Jack.
Aye.
Richard Panciera. Okay, Mr. Jack is appointed for a term expiring in 2018. The River Road Study Committee, Mr. Franco, are you doing this, or should I just list the new applicants?
I'll do some table setting. I'll preference your reading of the applicants by saying this is, the appointment of these additional applicants is to address an issue which was raised by several town meeting members, rightfully so, that there was maybe a lack of diversity on the committee, and that we needed some more local representatives. So the appointment of these four additional women hopefully addresses those concerns, and hopefully the committee can get on to its work.
Very well. So this is a committee that is a temporary committee and has no set limit or term, so there's sufficient numbers available. So let me just read the applicants, and you can vote for all or none of them. Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Aye.
Aye.
Maria Nobrega.
Aye.
Marilyn Newman.
Aye.
Yvette Johnson.
Aye.
So all those applicants have received a vote of appointment. And now, moving to the Brookline Women's Commission, we have two incumbent terms expiring. Both incumbents are interested in reappointment, and a vacancy that will expire in 2018. So we have one applicant for that new vacancy, so there are sufficient number of vacancies available. And so I'll list the incumbents first. Chris Chaniel-Sokit.
Aye.
Cheryl Ann Snyder.
Aye.
And for the vacancy, Sonal Javari.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our business. Thank you.